This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
Massive game in the Big Ten coming up this weekend as Indiana goes on the road to take on Ohio State. Ohio State pretty heavily favored in that game, but it's going to be a fun one. If we're going to break down Indiana at all this year, we got to bring on Riley Thomas. He is our guest for today to break down his thoughts on that massive game between Indiana and Ohio State. We'll talk Colorado trying to keep their win streak going, facing a pretty feisty Kansas team, and big game between Army and Notre Dame, playoff positioning on the line there as well. It's three really fun games. We'll talk to Riley about those games and his best bets across week 13 in college football. This is Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, joined here, as mentioned, by Riley Thomas. You can find him on X at _Riley8. You can find his work at FanDuel Research, where he is a writer for us. Riley, week 13 is setting to be a really, really fun one. How you doing today?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Delightful. Excited to watch all these games. We've been talking about Indiana with you, I feel like, since very, very early on this year. And now I guess I'll call Indiana collectively like your son, your large sons, now finally getting a legitimate test. They've passed every test so far, but I feel like it's going to be just a thrill to watch them in a legit game this week.
Yeah, it's going to be refreshing. There's been a lot of games they had where we thought the team was good and they weren't. Yeah. So it's finally play a big boy. So I'm really excited to see how that game goes, and really if Indiana's legit or not. We're about to find out.
I think we'll find out, but they've passed every test so far in pretty impressive fashion. But like I said, also Colorado, really fun team, shaping up to try to fight their way through the Big 12 against a feisty Kansas team. Army Notre Dame, all previews of those games coming up later on today. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. Tomorrow, NFL Week 12 Best Bets. Megan Payton will join us at 4 p.m. Eastern on the YouTube page, breaking down our thoughts on this week's biggest games. Also pretty fun slate in the NFL side of things. That's 4 p.m. Eastern, and that'll be up on the Covering the Spread podcast feed after the fact. Also on the Covering the Spread podcast feed, I went game by game for NFL Week 12, broke down my thoughts on each and every game, broke down some picks that I like at FanDuel Sportsbook for this week, and much more. Again, Covering the Spread podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe. And if you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating and review as well. Of course, also, again, on this brand new YouTube page, if you're watching there right now, thank you as always. Leave us a thumbs up and turn on notifications to get notified as we go live each and every weekday. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern, is when our DFS show with myself and Brandon Gadula will be over there. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, an affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in D.C. First online real money wager. Only $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/Chat Connecticut. Visit M&D Gambling Help at Oregon, Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelp@ma.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, Riley, last night we had our most recent update of the college football playoff bracket, and a lot of Big Ten teams towards the top of the rankings as of right now. But as far as the actual bracket breaks down the rankings, any big takeaways for you for what the committee has told us thus far?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was coming into this. Obviously, we're learning as we go with the first year of the 12 teams, but everybody kind of assumed that the champions of the Power Four would just get the buys. Obviously, I think the biggest takeaway was Boise State being in a position for a bye right now. That's interesting, but kind of we talked about this a little earlier. The committee was fast to fade BYU after they finally lost. So I think it's kind of a situation there where Boise State kind of naturally just benefits from BYU dropping so much. Now in the end, I think whoever wins the Big 12 will probably get that bye still. But I just think the biggest thing right now when we announced the 12-team playoff and such was, will conference championships matter as much anymore? And I think there's a real case here with how the bracket's lining up where it's like you could benefit big time from, say, like having that 5th seed and being the highest team that didn't win your conference. Like, you have Ohio State sitting here taking on BYU in the first game, followed by potentially Boise State. And it's kind of hard not to like that more than, say, like Oregon taking on Alabama or Notre Dame in their first game. Like, it's a tricky situation where, like, it seems like a layup at this point. Whoever wins the Big Ten is getting that 1 seed between probably Oregon and Ohio State. And it's like whoever loses that game and could potentially end up with a 5th seed, they could benefit big time here. So I think that whole thing is interesting. And also Tennessee kind of got a tough poll yesterday where they're kind of the first team out. And I was actually looking at, you can get plus odds for them to not make the playoff right now. I think it was around plus 128 or somewhere around there, which it's kind of hard not to, like that right now because they're kind of sitting back and helpless because all they have left is UTEP and Vanderbilt. So they need someone in front of them to lose, like a Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, or Notre Dame. So kind of hard not to like the plus odds when they're kind of sitting here and not controlling their own destiny.
Yeah, as you mentioned right now, Tennessee is plus 128 to make the college football playoff at FanDuel Sportsbook. Tough draw for them. Strength of schedule will not improve over the final 2 games for them either, so they can't really bolster their rating, which means they could get leapfrogged as well. So a couple paths of that one for Tennessee to potentially make the playoffs. But again, plus 128 in the no is where Riley is turning for that one. Let's talk now, Riley, about that really fun game on Saturdays. Indiana at Ohio State. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, it is Ohio State by 13.5. That was 12.5 yesterday, and now it's minus 115. Take the 13.5 on Indiana. So you're paying a price there still. It hasn't been a massive move, but still some movement in favor of Ohio State here. Total in this game is 51.5. That is down a tick from where it was yesterday as well. Now, I joked about this before, but you've been high in Indiana all year. You were talking about their implied totals way back in the day. We've been talking about taking them against the spread too. Really big underdogs here on the road against Ohio State. So can Indiana keep this game at least close enough to cover against Ohio State in Columbus?
Yeah, so at this point, I cannot go away from Indiana. I'm going to keep backing them, and it doesn't hurt that it keeps moving in Ohio State's direction, which probably won't move anymore, but I was really surprised to see it move that way because yesterday Ohio State had yet another major injury. Their starting center, Seth McLaughlin, I believe is how you pronounce it. He tore his Achilles in practice this week. So right now I'd say he's their best offensive lineman. And to lose that with, right up to where you're going to have a top 5 matchup is tough to figure out. They lost their starting left tackle, Josh Simmons, earlier in the year, and he was kind of playing himself into first-round contention. So, Ohio State, to me, they've had some recruiting issues on the offensive line recently, the last few years. So depth with this position group was kind of a concern, and now they're down potentially their 2 best offensive linemen for the season. And I think that's something that's really being overlooked here, especially when Indiana has a great run defense, and we know Ohio State wants to run the ball, and it's kind of hard to figure out moving around your offensive line everywhere last minute like this. And they already had to put their starting left guard, Donovan Jackson, over to left tackle. And keep in mind, he's never played tackle in college up until the last couple of weeks. So just between that and also I still have concerns about Ohio State's cornerback play. David Igbinosun has a lot of DPI issues. Denzel Burke's been all over the place. He was torched nonstop against Oregon. And Indiana is sitting here with the second most EPA per drop back. So it's kind of hard not to like that matchup as well. I definitely like Indiana to cover this.
That number again, 13.5 is minus 115 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Now, you talked about both sides of the ball here, liking the Indiana offense against this Ohio State defense and being skeptical of the Ohio State offense. Does that make you consider anything, any alternate markets here? Are you looking at the total in this game? Did you consider the Indiana team total again? Or was it really for you, because you had concerns about Ohio State on both sides of the ball, is that would push you towards the spread, which kind of gets you access to both those?
Yeah, I mean, if I was to get risky here personally, I like the alt line of plus 10.5 for Indiana to keep it within 10. You're getting plus odds there. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I think Ohio State will come out on top. I mean, they're way more talented team. You could have some questions about Indiana's pass protection after they kind of struggled to block Michigan a couple weeks ago. But yeah, I think there's enough here to where I like Indiana to keep it within 10. Something else with Ohio State is they've gotten off to a lot of slow starts recently, and Indiana has been leading at halftime in every game this year. They were even up by 14.5 against Michigan a couple weeks ago. So I think the first half spread for Indiana is another one that's interesting to me.
The plus 10.5 is plus 106 right now, FanDuel Sportsbook. The first half spread, Indiana plus 7.5 is minus 124. To your point, Northwestern actually led Ohio State at some point in the second quarter last week. They never got my hopes up, I'll say that. But like, they did have a lead at one point. Yeah. I conveniently chose to go to the concession stands after the block punt. So like, I got to miss all the true treachery there. But like you said, slow start for Ohio State. The secondary did not look amazing in that game. So kind of agree with what you're saying here. So we are in Indiana plus 13.5. That is minus 115, and still buying the Kurt Cignetti hype train as they go out to Columbus for this weekend. Let's talk about our second game for this weekend. Again, really fun matchup here. Colorado going on the road, take on Kansas right now, FanDuel Sportsbook. Colorado is minus 2.5. Total in this game is 59.5. And Colorado, Riley, is now the favorite to win the Big 12 with some really impressive games recently. But Kansas staying fights. We talked about that game against BYU last week, and they did get the win there. 4-6, but playing much better than that. So you got straight up Kansas versus Colorado on Saturday.
I'm going with Colorado to cover here. I think it's nice to get them at 2.5 as well. So you get a kind of a key number here. But yeah, I mean, Kansas is that was a team that, frankly, I was pretty high on before the year started. And like you said, I think they're better than what their record says. And they've shown that. I mean, they took out BYU game before that. They took out Iowa State. End of October, Kansas only lost by 2 against Kansas State. So they're pretty scary right now. Their quarterback, Jalen Daniels, he had 8 interceptions over the first 5 games. That was part of their issue. And the last 5 games, he only has 2 picks now. But I think the biggest thing for me where I'm going with Colorado here is obviously Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter are going to make the headlines. But Colorado has been like really good in turnover margin. They're top 10 in turnover margin in the country. They're forcing over 2 takeaways per game. I think they're 6th in the country in that mark. And it's kind of difficult for me to just forget about Daniel's interception woes early in the year. So that could resurface this week. Also, those teams that Kansas beat recently, they were very balanced offenses where they don't necessarily lean on the pass too much, which favored Kansas because they're outside the top 100 in yards allowed per passing attempts. And now they're going to face a team in Colorado that just wants to sit back and throw the ball all day. So I think that secondary is really susceptible in this matchup as well.
You talked about the turnover margin for Colorado. I feel like that's the best trait of Shedeur Sanders is his intelligence. Like, he just seems like he's very accurate and is able to read the field pretty well. Not the most amazing athlete, doesn't have the biggest arm by any means, but he just seems smart. And I feel like that can be a bit underrated. It's not going to be like the biggest upside kind of trait for him, but in terms of protecting the football and preventing this offense and bottoming out, when you're putting him against a somewhat vulnerable defense, I think that's kind of the situation where he can really thrive and make the floor of this Colorado offense really high.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Other than sometimes where it feels like he's trying to hold on to the ball too long.
Yeah.
At times,
he has a little bit of Joe Burrow in him. He's not Joe Burrow, but he has some big game hunter, old school Joe Burrow in him, kind of old school Russ too, where he'll try to hold it too long, look for the big play, and that kind of needs to go away at some point. It has a bit this year, but it still does pop up there more than it should.
Yeah, Kansas sacks are up a little bit in their last about month of play as well. So I'd say the biggest concern for me for Colorado here is if he hold on to the ball a bit too long, because Kansas can get pressure. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think this is a secondary that he could just sit back and make the right plays over and over again and put up, another 30, 40 points.
Yeah. we're making our colleague Austin Swain very happy because we're back in the Buffs, -2.5, -110 as Colorado takes on Kansas there. Let's finish up by talking about another fun game. It is Army at Notre Dame. Who knew this game would be as exciting as it is for this weekend? Notre Dame favored by 14.5. This game is at MetLife, I believe. Or it's at Yankee Stadium. It's out on the East Coast. Notre Dame favored by 14.5. So neutral site there. Total in this game is 44.5. And Army still has an outside shot at the playoff at this point, but they need a win here in order to keep that hope alive. So can they keep this one close enough to at least cover, or does Notre Dame keep the good vibes rolling?
So for me, this whole game is a lesson learned when Navy took on Notre Dame. I remember I was on this podcast the week they played. I was all over Navy. I took them to cover. I took the under for that game as well. Notre Dame ended up winning, I think it was 51-13. So that did not go my way at all. And Army's just another team that they just want to run the ball nonstop. Triple option, of course. With their flex bone offense. So it's not like Notre Dame hasn't seen a team like this, and they already beat the brakes off of Navy early in the year. And I think we're in a similar situation here where Army has some really good defensive numbers. All their statistics look great, but then when you're digging into who they've played, not really anybody on Notre Dame's level whatsoever. I was looking at their team, the run offenses that Army's seen, and 8 of those 10 teams were outside the top 100 in EPA per rushing attempt. And then we have Notre Dame sitting here at 6 in EPA per rushing attempt. So could be another scenario here where Army can't stop the run, similar to where Navy couldn't. And Riley Leonard's been pretty darn good for Notre Dame over the last month, or I'd say 5 or 6 games. So I wouldn't be surprised when Notre Dame just kind of walks away with this winning by 20, 30 points. So I learned my lesson last time, and this time I'm going with Notre Dame to cover.
Well, hopefully this is growth, and it's not a situation where it was like, oh, we've overcorrected, and now suddenly Army's going to bounce back there. And I think that probably, if not for that Navy game, this spread might be a bit tighter, but I do feel like the betting public may have had a similar reaction to you, where it's like, okay, we're not getting fooled again. We're going to make this number really big and kind of make Army prove us wrong, essentially.
Yeah. It's just with how similar those two teams play with just running the ball and the triple option stuff. It's kind of hard not to compare the two and just be like, hey, if it went this way, it's going to go the same. But I can't go with the dog again in this one.
I get it.
I got burnt too bad.
I get it for sure. Okay, so Riley is on Notre Dame -14.5, -115 for that one. Okay, Riley, I'm going to open up the board for you right now. Where else is seeing value across Week 13 at FanDuel Sportsbook?
I am loving SMU's point total this week against Virginia. It's set at 34.5. So that's obviously a favorable number there, where they scored 35 points. They got their over, but so also like the odds there too at -106. But SMU's one of those teams right now where we were discussing just the whole way the playoff is shaking out. SMU's another team that I like that you could maybe go for to make the playoff. They were around like +105 to make it. They have a real chance of winning the ACC right now, mostly courtesy of their offense. They're on a 7-game win streak. During that, they've put up over 42 points per game. Meanwhile, Virginia's given up over 34 points in 3 of their last 4. So they're not exactly playing a great defense here. I think their offense could feast again. And the biggest thing here is Virginia's biggest worry on defense is defending the pass. I think they're around 80th and EPA allowed per drop back versus being top 50 against the run. And while SMU runs the ball a lot, they're top 10 in the country in yards per passing attempt. They've been hitting a ton of big plays during this win streak throughout the air. Their quarterback is Kevin Jennings has averaged around 300 passing yards a game over the last 4. So I just think everything about this is just a great matchup for SMU's offense. I think it's going to keep rolling. I'm really high on them right now. I wouldn't be surprised if they won the ACC. I mean, Miami's nonstop in shootouts, and you get into that, who knows? Each team can't be stopped. It's basically whoever has the ball last.
That'd be a fun game to watch. I do. We get to see that for sure as well. So Riley's on SMU team total over 34.5 at -106. Any other bets stand out to you across Week 13?
Yeah, I'm going to another top 25 matchup in BYU and Arizona State. Big 12's gotten really messy here, where essentially it kind of looks like a real like logjam on who could play Colorado in that Big 12 championship game. But Arizona State, they've been one of the most fun stories in the country, I think, this year. Just kind of out of nowhere, and here they are at 8-2, and they could play in that Big 12 championship game. And BYU's just been a goofy team where they've been like really, really good in red zone offense, really, really good on fourth down conversions, yet they're only around like 30% on third down conversions. And if you're that bad on third down, that doesn't exactly spell winning, yet they have most of the time. But the last 2 weeks, BYU just hasn't looked the same. Their offensive numbers are way down. Their third down conversion rate's gone down even more. It's around like 18% in their last 2 games. Their red zone offense that was scoring around like 90% of the red zone possessions, their red zone offense now the last 2 games are just not getting it in the end zone like they were. So between just being really bad on third down, not scoring in the red zone anymore, I just don't know how they're going to keep winning. And meanwhile, Arizona State's really, really good on third down. Their last 3 games during their win streak, they're converting about 58% of their third down. For reference, Miami leads the country in that at about 55%. So Arizona State's mark on third down has been like really, really good recently. So I think just winning key downs, stuff like that this weekend is where I'm liking Arizona State to cover the spread. Not the biggest fan of the 3.5. I think it might be worth the risk with the plus odds, but you can get them at -2.5 at around like -125, I think. So that's even interesting to me because you can get a key number there.
Yeah.
But it's kind of more of like, let's fade BYU at this point because they've been goofy all year. It felt like they were going to lose eventually, and now it's kind of just falling apart.
And I think that a lot of people saw that coming because the red zone scoring you mentioned, that was screaming regression. So it's not like the fall backwards to them is out of nowhere. It kind of seems like this is like, we could have expected this for sure. So Riley likes Arizona State -3.5 even money. Quick pitch here for watching on YouTube is to get the most up-to-date odds, get them as we're discussing it, because the Colorado game just moved across three. It's now 3.5 -102. So this is why you watch on YouTube, so you can get the most up-to-date odds as we're talking about them. It's only -102 in the 3.5, but still always good to get the most up-to-date odds, which is why recommend watching YouTube whenever you have the chance to do so. That is Riley Thomas. Make sure you find him on X at _Riley8. Find his work over at FanDuel Research, where he is a writer for us. Riley, enjoy the college football this weekend. Good luck. I'm going to call him your Hoosiers at this point. I know that you're very close to Columbus and stuff like that, so I'm going to call them your Hoosiers regardless. So good luck to them. Enjoy the football. Talk to you again soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me on. Enjoyed it.
Big thanks to Riley once again. You can find him on X at _Riley8. I am on X at JimSannes and on Blue Sky at JimSannes as well. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. Back again tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern on the YouTube page, talking NFL DFS Week 12. And then 4 p.m. Eastern, Megan Payton joins us, breakdown her thoughts on NFL Week 12, her favorite bets there. We'll talk to all of you then. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.